My name is Coda. My partner, Officer Ben Carter, says I have the soul of an old warrior. Most days we just chase the sun across the vast Mojave expanse, the two of us against the endless dust and sky. Our life is simple, predictable, but one day, the wind changed. It carried a scent that didn't belong. It wasn't sagebrush. It wasn't a coyote. It was the scent of saltwater tears in a land with no ocean. The smell of a hope so broken, it had almost turned to dust. My partner couldn't smell it, but I did. My entire being screamed that something was wrong. And what we discovered at the end of that heartbreaking trail will not only show you the depths of human cruelty, it will prove to you that sometimes the most desperate prayers are answered not with a voice from the heavens, but with the cold nose and unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to let a soul be forgotten. My world isn't made of words. It's made of the sun on my fur, the low rumble of my partner's truck, and a million scents carried on the wind. It's a language older than any spoken by man, a language of truth. I understand the world not by what I am told, but by what I can feel, hear, and most importantly, smell. That morning started just like any other. The sun was a soft gold, not yet the angry white it would become by noon. I felt the familiar vibrations through the floorboards as Ben Carter moved through his small cabin, the sharp, bitter scent of his coffee, the smell that meant the day was truly beginning. Then the sound of his heavy boots, a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. He stopped and I felt his hand on my head, scratching that perfect spot right behind my ears. His scent was calm, like worn leather and quiet confidence. He smelled like safety. He smelled like my partner. We climbed into our metal den, the patrol truck that carried us across the Mojave expanse every day. It was our space, filled with the familiar sense of our life together. The air conditioning hummed, a welcome relief from the already warming air. Ben was quiet, his mind on the day ahead, on the stretch of empty highway that was our responsibility. I rested my head on the center console, my eyes half closed, content. The desert rolled by, a beautiful, harsh landscape of red rock and stubborn, spiky plants. It was peaceful. It was our normal. And then it wasn't. It came without a sound, a change in the wind, a single foreign note in the symphony of the desert. My head snapped up. My ears, which had been relaxed, swiveled forward, trying to catch it again. Ben glanced at me. "What is it, boy? Rabbit?" I ignored the question. This wasn't the scent of a rabbit, warm and earthy. This was something else. I pushed my nose against the air vent, drawing the outside world in, trying to dissect the message. The wind brought it again, stronger this time. It was thin, brittle. It smelled like salt water in a place that had held no ocean for millennia. It was the scent of a candle flame just after it's been snuffed out. The smell of something that was once bright and warm, now gone cold. It was the smell of a life unraveling. I stood up fully in the passenger seat, my paws on the dashboard, my body tense. A low whine escaped my throat. I couldn't help it. My entire being was screaming. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. "Easy, Coda," Ben said, his voice calm, but his eyes flickered toward me again. "Settle down." But I couldn't settle. The scent was a hook in my soul, pulling me. It was desperate. It was the smell of a hope so broken, it had almost turned to dust. I looked at Ben, my eyes pleading with him to understand a language he couldn't speak. I whined again, louder this time, more insistent. I pawed at the door. I had to get out. I had to follow it. He saw the change in me then. This wasn't me being restless. This wasn't a distraction. This was an alert. He slowed the truck, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" he murmured, more to himself than to me. The scent was starting to fade, carried away by the shifting currents of the air. Panic rose in my chest. "No, no, don't lose it." I let out a bark. It wasn't a happy bark or an angry one. It was a single, sharp, urgent explosion of sound that shattered the quiet calm of our morning. It was my last resort. It was me shouting, "Listen to me." That's what did it. He stopped the truck completely, the engine idling softly. He turned and looked at me, really looked at me. He didn't see a restless dog. He saw his partner. He saw the unwavering certainty in my eyes, the desperate tension in my body. He had spent years learning to read me, to trust the instincts that went beyond his human senses. And in this moment, that trust won. "All right, Coda," he said, his voice low and serious. "All right, I hear you." He turned the truck off the paved road, the tires crunching over the gravel and sand, pointing us in the direction I was facing. "Show me," he said. "Show me what you've got." Relief washed over me, so powerful it almost made my legs weak. He understood. In that moment, it wasn't about my training. It wasn't about obedience. It was a calling, a pull from deep inside that said a life was tangled in the threads of that strange, sad wind. Every soul leaves a trace, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had to follow that trace, no matter where it led. The place the scent led us to felt wrong. The sun beat down, but there was a coldness here that had nothing to do with temperature. The rocks were sharp, jagged, like broken teeth against the pale blue sky. The air was still, heavy, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to be over. Even the ground felt different under my paws, brittle and unwelcoming. Ben got out of the truck, leaving the door open. His movements were slow, deliberate. His usual calm had been sharpened to a point, a focused tension I knew well. It was the energy he had before a storm, before a raid. It was the energy of a protector preparing for the unknown. I jumped down after him, my nose already to the cracked earth. The whisper on the wind was now a scream in my senses. It was so much stronger here. I could finally separate the layers of it. There was the sharp, acrid smell of fear, old and new. There was the faint metallic tang of dried blood. And underneath it all, woven through everything, was that overwhelming scent of hopelessness. It was a smell that made the fur on my back prickle, a scent that spoke of a soul that had given up. I led the way, my tail held low and stiff. Ben was right behind me, his boots crunching softly on the gravel, a steady rhythm that was my only anchor in this sea of wrongness. He trusted me completely now. He was my shadow and I was his guide. And then I saw her. She was just a splash of white fabric against the vast red rock, small and fragile. My mind registered the image like a photograph I could never unsee, a broken bird with clipped wings, left behind by a cruel world. Her head was bowed, her hair a tangled curtain that hid her face. The plastic cords that bound her to the stone pillar seemed to burn into the rock itself. Their scent was sharp, biting, an insult to the natural world around them. My first instinct, the pure dog part of me, was to run to her, to whine, to nudge her with my nose until she responded, to lick the tears I could smell but not see, to tell her in my own way that we were here. But my training, the thousands of hours with Ben, held me like a leash. I froze, my body rigid. I looked back at Ben, my eyes locking with his, and I let out the lowest, softest whine I could manage. It was the sound I made when a storm was coming, a sound of gentle warning. It was my way of saying, "Be careful with this one. She is made of glass." He understood. He nodded once, a barely perceptible motion, before moving past me. He knelt beside her, and the sound of his knife was not threatening. It was a soft shh as it sliced through the plastic bindings. "Ma'am," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, the same voice he used with me when I was scared. "Hey, can you hear me? You're safe now." She flinched at his touch. I saw her whole body tense, a small, wounded animal preparing for another blow. My heart ached for her. She didn't know we were the good ones. To her, we were just more strangers in her nightmare. When the last cord fell away, she slumped forward and Ben caught her, his strong arms a cradle. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. As he started the slow walk back to the truck, I fell into step beside them, a silent shadow of support. I didn't get too close, not wanting to startle her further. But as he adjusted his grip, her limp hand dangled near my head. This was my chance. Slowly, deliberately, I leaned in and pressed my cold, wet nose gently against the back of her knuckles. It was a small question. "Are you there?" "I am here." For a heartbeat, her fingers tensed, a reflex of fear. But then, something changed. A tiny bit of the tension left her. A sigh, so quiet it was almost swallowed by the desert, escaped her lips. A single tear squeezed from beneath her closed eyelid and traced a path through the grime on her cheek. I had made contact. The broken bird knew we weren't here to cause more harm. In that moment, she wasn't a mission or a victim. She was one of us. She was part of our pack now, and we would protect her. A gentle touch can heal a wound that words cannot reach. And as the truck rumbled back toward the town of Dust Devil Creek, I didn't take my usual spot up front. I lay on the floor in the back, as close to her as I could get, letting my steady, rhythmic breathing tell her what I could not say in words. You are safe now. Just breathe with me. You are safe. The place they called a hospital smelled clean, but it was a lie. It was a sharp, aggressive kind of clean, a sterile scent that fought to cover up all the pain and fear that lived within its walls. To humans, it might have smelled like safety and healing. To me, it smelled like a secret being kept. Clara was in a quiet room. Her scent was calmer now, mixed with the smell of antiseptic soap and soft cotton sheets. The scent of hopelessness had faded, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. Ben was there, a constant, reassuring presence in a chair by the window. But I could smell his fatigue, too. The long hours, the worry. It clung to him like a second skin. So I took my post. I lay in the corner of the room, a silent sentinel. My body relaxed, but my senses on high alert. My job was to watch, to wait, to guard the fragile peace we had fought for. For a while, all was calm. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic beeps of the machines and Clara's steady breathing. It was a healing kind of quiet. But then, a new scent drifted under the door. It was subtle at first. On the surface, it smelled right. It had the clean, lilac soap and sterile scrub scent of the other caregivers who had come and gone. But my nose, which trusts nothing on the surface, caught what lay beneath. Underneath the soap and sterility, there was something else. Something cold and sharp, like rusted metal hidden in clean laundry. It was the scent of a predator that had learned to smell like prey. It was the smell of a lie. My head lifted from my paws, my ears twitched. A woman dressed as a nurse walked in, a tray in her hands. She smiled at Clara, a bright, professional smile. But her scent didn't smile. Her scent was tense, coiled, like a snake waiting to strike. A low growl started deep in my chest, a vibration before it was a sound. I couldn't stop it. My instincts were screaming at me. Ben looked over, his expression weary. Coda, quiet, he whispered. She's here to help. But he was wrong. I knew he was wrong. I rose to my feet, my body stiff. The woman's smile faltered for a fraction of a second as her eyes darted toward me. And in that flicker of a moment, her scent changed. The smell of her lie was now mixed with a spike of adrenaline, of fear, of anger. She was afraid I could see her for what she was. That was all the confirmation I needed. She took a step closer to Clara's bed, her hands reaching out as if to adjust the IV drip. That was the trigger. All my training, all my loyalty, all my protective instinct for this broken woman converged into a single purpose. I didn't lunge. I didn't attack. I moved with a silent, fluid power, placing my body directly between the woman and Clara. I became a living shield. My feet were planted, my muscles were coiled, and I looked straight into the woman's eyes. Then I let out a bark. It wasn't the sharp, urgent bark from the desert. This was deeper, louder, a thunderous roar that shook the small room, a sound that demanded all attention, a sound that said, I see you, stay back. Clara flinched awake, her eyes wide with fresh terror. The woman froze, her mask of professionalism shattered. Her hand, the one hidden from Ben's view, moved instinctively toward her waistband. And in that instant, Ben saw it too. My bark had broken the spell. He saw her panicked eyes. He saw her furtive movement. He was on his feet in a flash, his voice a commanding roar that echoed my own. Hands where I can see them. Now! The chaos that followed was a blur of human motion and shouting. Security guards arrived. The woman was restrained. The hidden blade was found. But my eyes never left Clara. I didn't relax, didn't soften my stance. until the cold, deceitful scent of the woman was gone from the room for good. A threat doesn't always announce itself with a shout. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a hidden blade. True loyalty is seeing the danger that others cannot. As Ben came over and rested a shaking hand on my head, I looked from him to the terrified woman in the bed. I finally understood. My job wasn't just to find the lost, it was to protect them once they were found. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this fight was far from over. The monsters weren't just in the desert. They were willing to walk right into the light to finish what they started. The decision was made without a single word passing between us. Ben knew and I knew that the hospital was no longer a sanctuary. It was a target. So we left. We drove away from the clean, sterile lies of the town and headed for the hills, toward the only place Ben considered a true fortress, his cabin. As we climbed the winding dirt road, the air changed. The scent of the town faded, replaced by the honest smell of the high desert, pinyon pines, dry earth, and a clean, crisp wind. This was Ben's world. This was our world. The cabin wasn't big or fancy. It was made of wood that had been weathered by 100 seasons with a porch that looked out over the entire expanse. To me, it smelled of safety. It smelled of pine wood, the ashes of 100 old fires in the hearth, the scent of Ben's old books, and the quiet history of his family. It was the one place on earth where he was not Officer Carter, but just Ben. And by bringing Clara here, he was sharing that sacred space. He was offering her not just a roof, but a piece of his own peace. She was so quiet in this new space, a ghost in flannel. During the day, she would sit on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, even in the warmth. She would stare out at the horizon, her eyes seeing something far beyond the jagged mountains. She watched Ben and me as we went about our quiet routines, her expression unreadable. I knew not to push. Healing, like tracking, requires patience. You cannot force it. You can only give it space and wait for a sign. So I would lie on the porch near her, not touching, but letting her know I was there, a quiet guardian for her quiet grief. But when the sun went down, everything changed. The safety of the cabin walls couldn't keep her oldest enemy out, the fear that lived inside her own mind. Night after night, it was the same. I would take my post on the old rug outside her bedroom door. The cabin would fall silent, the only sound the gentle creak of the wood settling, and then it would begin. First, the restless shifting under the blankets, then the soft whimpers, sounds of a soul trapped in a nightmare. Her nightmares had a scent. It was a smell that would drift from under her door, a cold vapor in the warm cabin. It smelled of burning sun, hot plastic cutting into skin, and the sharp metallic tang of pure terror. It was the scent of the rock in the desert, a memory so powerful it followed her even here. My job was to lie there and endure it, to be a silent anchor against the storm of her past. One night it was worse. The whimpering turned into a sharp, choked gasp, a sound of someone fighting for air when there was nothing physically wrong. It was a sound of pure suffocation. And I couldn't just lie there anymore. My duty to her, my promise to protect her, overrode any thought of giving her space. I pushed the door open gently with my nose. The room was dark, save for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window. She was sitting bolt upright in bed, her body trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her eyes were wide open, but seeing nothing in the room. She was back at the rock. I didn't bark. I didn't whine. I walked slowly to her bedside. The floorboards didn't make a sound under my paws. I stopped beside the bed and, with a soft exhale, I rested my heavy head on the edge of the mattress, right next to her clenched fist. I just stayed there, solid and real, a warm weight in her cold nightmare. I looked at her, hoping my calm, steady gaze could be an anchor for her, something to pull her back from the memory. For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly, as if her arm weighed 1,000 pounds, she lifted her hand. Her fingers were trembling. She hesitated for a second. Then gently, so gently, she laid her hand on my head, her fingers sinking into my thick fur. It was the first time she had touched me willingly. I felt a tremor go through her, a long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty all the fear from her lungs. I responded with the only comfort I could offer, a soft, warm lick on the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers began to softly stroke my fur, a repetitive, calming motion. The frantic scent of her fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet, fragile peace. I stayed there until her breathing deepened, until her hand rested heavily on my head in sleep. I then slid off the bed and curled up on the rug beside her, where I remained until the morning sun came to chase the last of the shadows away. Sometimes the greatest comfort isn't in fixing a problem or offering words of advice. It's in a silent presence that sits with you in the dark and simply says, I am here. You are not alone. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens one quiet moment at a time. I knew she still had to face her own monsters. I couldn't fight her memories for her. But as the sun rose, I made a silent vow. She would never, ever have to face them alone again. The quiet days at the cabin were a healing balm. But a warrior cannot rest for too long. His skills, like a blade, must be kept sharp. Ben knew this. He knew that the peace we had found was temporary, a pause in a much larger fight. So we went back out into the expanse, not to search for monsters, but to reconnect with our purpose, with the bond that made us a team. It started as a game, a puzzle of scents that I loved. Ben would walk a long, winding path through the canyons, leaving a practice track, a scent that was uniquely his. My job was to find it, to follow its every twist and turn. It was a dance I knew well, my nose to the ground, my tail wagging with the joy of the hunt. I was in my element. The world simplified into one thing, following the familiar, safe scent of my partner. I was deep into the puzzle, my mind focused, when a different scent drifted across my path. It was not like the scent that led me to Clara. That one had been a fresh wound, a desperate, living scream on the wind. This was different. This was old, faint. It was like the ghost of a scent, a bad memory that had been baked into the very dirt by years of unrelenting sun. It was an echo of pain, so quiet I almost missed it. I faltered in my tracks, my head lifting. My training, my desire to please Ben, told me to ignore it, to focus on the game. But my soul, that old warrior part of me that Ben talked about, could not let it go. It was a sour note in the beautiful song of the desert. I tried to push it away and refocus on Ben's track, but the ghost scent clung to the air, persistent and cold. It was the smell of suffering, but multiplied. It was the scent of many tears, long since dried. I made a choice. I broke from the training exercise, turning away from Ben's track and following the faint, terrible whisper. Ben's voice called out, confused at first, then firm. Coda, no, to me, heal. He thought I was being disobedient, distracted by a desert hare or a coyote. He couldn't smell what I could smell. He couldn't feel this echo in the earth. I ignored his command. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But my instinct was a roaring fire, and his words were just wind. I had to follow it. The scent led me away from the open ground and toward a sheer wall of dark red rock, a place of deep shadows and jagged edges. It seemed like a dead end, but the scent was strongest here, seeping from the ground at the base of the cliff, almost hidden by a dead, thorny mesquite branch and a scattering of loose rocks. This was it, the source. I didn't wait for permission. I started digging. My paws became pistons, tearing at the dry, compacted earth. Dirt and small rocks flew behind me. I was frantic, possessed by a single desperate thought. I have to show him. He has to see. Ben's frustrated calls stopped. He walked over to me, his shadow falling over my frantic work. He saw my desperation, the wild look in my eyes, the way my entire body was consumed by this one task. He knew this wasn't a game. He knew this was real. He knelt beside me. Okay, boy, he said softly, his voice full of a dawning understanding. Okay. What did you find? His hands joined my paws, pulling away the larger rocks, clearing the brush I had unearthed. Together we worked, a silent, focused team. And then his fingers brushed against something hard and flat under the dirt. He pulled away the last of the debris, revealing a dark steel hatch, painted to look like the earth around it. A hidden door. The moment he lifted it, a rush of air escaped from the darkness below. It was a physical blow, a concentrated blast of all the bad smells I had been sensing. Stale air, damp mold, the sour scent of human fear, and something else. Something sharp and chemical that burned my nose and made me sneeze. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He reached for his flashlight and his radio, his movements now tense and urgent. I stayed by the opening, peering into the blackness, as he followed me down into the earth. The beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, and what it revealed stole the air from my lungs. A small, dark space, a rusted folding chair in the corner. And on the floor, a small, worn-out shoe that could never have belonged to an adult. Long strands of dark hair, tangled in a dirty, discarded blanket, and a stained rag, the source of the chemical smell that reeked of chloroform. It was a cage, a tomb for the living, a place where hope had been brought to die over and over again. The worst monsters aren't the ones in stories. They are the ones who build cages for the innocent. The truth, no matter how deep you bury it, always finds a way to the surface. Standing there in the mouth of that dark, silent place, I finally, truly understood. Clara wasn't a random act of cruelty. She wasn't the beginning or the end of the story. She was just one piece of a vast, horrifying puzzle. And I had just dug up the next piece from its shallow grave. After the discovery in the earth, a heavy silence settled in the cabin. It was the silence of a truth too big for words. Ben was on the radio constantly, his voice low and urgent. Clara was quieter than ever, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the quiet of fear. It was the quiet of thought, of processing, of a slow burn starting deep within her. I could smell the change. The scent of her grief was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that smelled like flint and steel. And as if the world itself could feel the tension, a storm began to gather on the horizon. I felt it long before the humans did, a drop in the air pressure that made my ears feel strange, a stillness in the wind that was unnatural, as if the desert was holding its breath. I began to pace, unable to settle. A low whine caught in my throat. The light outside shifted from bright gold to a strange, bruised, coppery orange. Everything looked old and tired. Ben looked up from his maps. "Storm's coming, Coda. A bad one." It hit us with the force of a freight train. A roaring wall of red sand and fury slammed into the cabin. The wind howled like a wounded animal, screaming through the eaves and rattling the windows in their frames. The world outside simply disappeared, erased by a swirling, violent chaos of rust-colored nothingness. We were on a tiny wooden island in the middle of a raging sea of sand. Inside, the air grew thick and close. Ben sealed the last window, and the three of us were hunkered down in the main room, the howl of the wind, our only companion. And in the middle of that natural chaos, another kind of chaos cut through. The radio on the counter crackled to life. A man's voice, sharp and urgent, fought through the static. It was fragmented, broken by the storm's fury. "Unit 4, Sector Command. Surveillance drone caught. Vehicle movement near Border Route 6. Likely target. Convoy. Suspected transfer of assets within the hour. Using the storm as cover." The room went silent, the only sound the screaming wind and the crackling radio. My ears flattened against my head. I knew what those words meant. The monsters were on the move. They were using the storm, this beautiful, terrible force of nature, as a shield for their own darkness. Ben was already grabbing his gear, his face a mask of grim determination. "They're moving them now," he said, his voice tight. Clara, who had been sitting by the cold fireplace, stood up. She walked to the window and stared out into the red blur, though there was nothing to see. When she turned back, her face was transformed. The victim I had found at the rock was gone. The quiet, haunted woman from the cabin was gone. In her place was a soldier. The scent of fear that had clung to her for days was finally burning away, replaced by a cold, sharp scent of resolve, like ice forming on water. "I know where they are," she said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It was clear, steady, and certain. "Border Route 6 has a canyon turnoff. They called it the shelf. It's where they load up. It's remote, defensible. It's where they would go. I saw the conflict rage in Ben's eyes. His every instinct as an officer told him to act on this intelligence, but his every instinct as a man, as her protector, told him to keep her here, safe, locked away from the storm and the violence. He looked at her, then at the howling abyss outside. Clara, no, it's too dangerous. You're not ready. You don't understand, she replied, taking a step toward him. I will never be ready, but I will not sit here while other women are taken down that same path. I know the terrain. I know what to look for. You need me. He was torn. I could feel his turmoil. So I did the only thing I could. I walked from my spot by the hearth and stood directly between them. I didn't lean toward Ben. I didn't nudge Clara. I just stood there, a solid bridge connecting them, and I looked from one determined face to the other. My presence was a silent statement. We are a pack, and a pack faces the storm together. Ben looked down at me, at my unwavering gaze. He saw that I was with her. He saw the strength she was offering, not asking for. The conflict in his eyes settled. He gave her a single sharp nod. The decision was made. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it, for a cause greater than yourself. Sometimes you have to walk into the storm to find the calm on the other side. As we pushed through the thinning edges of the sandstorm minutes later, the air in the truck was different. The world outside was still a chaotic blur of dust and wind. But inside our small metal den, there was a new scent. It wasn't the scent of fear or anger or even grim duty. It was the clean, powerful, and unifying scent of purpose. The canyon mouth was a wound carved into the sandstone cliffs. The air here was different, heavy with stillness and unspoken secrets. The storm had washed the world clean, but it couldn't wash away the tracks. They were everywhere, crisscrossing the dirt floor of the canyon, the marks of heavy trucks and jeeps. Some were old, faded by the sun. Some were fresh. They were here. We left the truck behind, becoming three silent shadows moving into the maze of rock. Clara, who had been a passenger in her own rescue, was now a guide. Her eyes scanned the ridges and she pointed. They use the high ground for lookouts, she whispered, her voice barely a breath of air. We need to stay low. I took the lead. My paws, calloused from a lifetime on this harsh terrain, made no sound on the gravel. Every nerve in my body was on fire. I could taste the lingering scent of their exhaust fumes, the smell of stale cigarette smoke caught in the brush. And underneath it all, the faint, sour tang of nervous sweat. They were close. Ben and Clara moved behind me, their steps light, their trust in me absolute. My job was simple, to follow the scent and to warn them of danger. The danger came sooner than I expected. I was leading us along what looked like a clear path, a shallow rut carved by runoff from the storms. But then, a new scent hit my nose. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was wrong. It was the cold, dead smell of buried metal, the sharp bite of chemicals, and the unmistakable scent of freshly disturbed earth trying to hide a secret. I froze mid-stride, my body instantly rigid, my tail stiff as an iron bar. One more step, and the world would have torn itself apart. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I simply stood, a living statue of warning. Ben came up beside me, his own movement stopping instantly. He knew my signals. He knew this posture meant something more than caution. It meant a threat, immediate and unseen. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the ground in front of me. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Then his eyes narrowed. He saw it, a faint circle in the dirt, almost invisible. "Pressure plate," he breathed, the words barely audible. He put a hand on my back, a firm, grounding pressure. "Good boy, Coda. Good boy." He slowly guided us back, away from the hidden mine, his praise a warm glow in my chest. I had not just found the enemy. I had saved my pack. We found another way, a treacherous climb up a side ridge that kept us hidden from view. From the top, we could finally see them. Down in the clearing below, there were two large vans, their doors open. Three men stood talking, their weapons held casually. Their laughter a harsh, ugly sound that desecrated the canyon silence. And then I saw him, Marcus. He stepped out from behind one of the trucks, giving instructions. Even from this distance, his scent rolled up the ridge and hit me like a physical blow. It was him. The arrogant, cruel scent that had been a ghostly stain on Clara's skin was now fresh, real, and alive. It was the scent of the monster. A growl started deep in my chest, a low rumble like the earth itself was getting angry. This was no longer just a mission. This was personal. My muscles bunched, ready to spring. Ben's hand rested on my collar, a gentle but firm restraint. "Not yet, partner," he whispered. "Not yet." I watched as they pulled another woman from the back of the van, another broken bird. Her scent of terror was a fresh torment, fanning the flames of my own cold rage. We waited. The moment stretched into an eternity, the air thick with anticipation. Then Ben's radio crackled softly. A single word. "Go!" The world exploded into controlled chaos. Ben's team moved in from the other side. Shouts echoed through the canyon. But my world had narrowed to a single point of focus. In the confusion, Marcus bolted. He didn't fight. He ran. He scrambled up the far side of the canyon, a desperate animal seeking escape. Ben's voice cut through the noise. "Coda, get him!" It was not a command. It was a release. The restraint on my collar was gone, and I ran. The world became a blur of motion and instinct. The ground flew beneath my paws. My powerful legs pumped, eating up the distance between us. The sounds of the raid faded behind me. There was only the hunt. The scent of his fear was now a beacon, a screaming trail I could not lose. He was fast, a desperate man running for his life. But I was faster. I was running with the pain of every woman he had ever hurt fueling my stride. He glanced back, his eyes wide with panic as he saw me closing the gap. He fumbled at his waistband, reaching for the weapon holstered there. That was his final mistake. In that instant, there was no more thought. There was no more training. There was only pure, primal purpose. I launched myself off a rocky outcrop, a blur of black and tan fur flying through the air. I hit him with the full force of my 80-pound body. The impact sent us both tumbling, his weapon clattering harmlessly against the rocks. Before he could recover, I was on him. I pinned him to the ground, my teeth bared, inches from his throat. The growl that ripped from my chest was not the sound of a dog. It was the sound of justice. It was the rumble of the desert itself, a furious, righteous sound that promised there would be no more running. There is a profound difference between violence and justice. One is an act designed to cause pain. The other is an act designed to end it. Evil may run fast, but it can never outrun the consequences. I held him there, a statue of controlled rage, my eyes locked on his, letting him know that his reign of terror was over. My hunt was over. The courtroom was another kind of cage, but one made of polished wood and silence instead of rock and sand. The air was thick with scents I didn't understand. The smell of old paper from 1,000 books, the sharp scent of floor polish, and underneath it all, the quiet, simmering tension of humans waiting. It was a place of rules I couldn't see and words I couldn't comprehend. I lay at Ben's feet, my head on my paws, feeling the low hum of anxiety from the strangers all around us. Then I saw them. First Marcus, led to a table by men in uniforms. His scent hit me even from across the room, and I lifted my head. The arrogance was gone. The cruel, dominant smell of the canyon was gone. It had been replaced by something else, something weak and sour, like milk left out in the sun. It was the scent of a predator who had finally been trapped, the smell of his power rotting away from the inside out. He was small now. And then I saw Clara. She walked in and sat in the front row, right next to Ben. Her transformation was breathtaking. The scent of fear, the ghost that had haunted her for so long, was finally gone. In its place was a new scent, one I was just beginning to learn. It was calm and solid. It smelled like clean stone after a heavy rain, like the deep, quiet strength of the earth itself. Her back was straight, her head held high. The broken bird was gone. An eagle sat in her place. When she was called to the witness stand, she walked with steps that were slow but certain. Each footfall was deliberate, a claim on the space that had been stolen from her. She spoke, and while I didn't know the words, I knew the tone. It was a voice free of tremors, a voice that carried the simple, unbreakable weight of truth. She looked at Marcus, not with fear or with hatred, but with a kind of clear-eyed finality, as if he were a chapter in a book she was now closing. And then he did something stupid. As she finished speaking, a sound escaped his lips. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, ugly, sneering little laugh. It was the last, pathetic attempt of a bully to make her feel small, to poison her truth with his contempt. Something inside me, that ancient warrior soul, snapped. It wasn't a decision. It was a reflex. I didn't growl. I didn't move to attack. I simply rose to my feet in one fluid motion, a silent black and tan shadow of support beside my partner. I stood rigid, my eyes locked on Marcus, and I let out one single explosive bark. It was not a bark of aggression. It was a bark of punctuation. It was a thunderclap that shattered the smug silence he had tried to create. It cut his sneering laugh in half and left it hanging, dead, in the air. Every head in the room turned. The bailiff instinctively reached for his weapon. Ben placed a calming hand on my collar, but he didn't pull me back. The judge, a woman with wise, tired eyes, looked at me, then back at the pale face of Marcus, and for a moment, I think she understood completely. My bark was not a disruption of justice. It was a declaration of it. It said, "We hear her. We believe her. Your poison has no power here." Marcus shrank back in his seat, the last of his false bravado gone. The sound of truth had been spoken, and I had simply provided the echo. Later that afternoon, we stood outside in the warm sun. A woman in a crisp uniform, Captain Torres, stood at a podium and spoke words of praise. People clapped. Ben stepped forward looking uncomfortable in the spotlight, and they pinned a shiny medal on his chest. He smelled of quiet pride. Then the woman turned to me. "And to our four-legged hero," she said, her voice warm. She knelt down and attached another medal to my vest. It was cold and heavy and clinked when I moved. I wagged my tail, mostly because everyone seemed so happy. The medal didn't mean much to me. It was a human thing. My real reward was across the courtyard. I saw Clara standing there watching us, and she was smiling. It wasn't the small, hesitant smile I had seen at the cabin. This one was big and bright and real. It reached her eyes, crinkling the corners, and lit up her whole face. It was the smile of someone who was finally, truly free. That was it. That was the only medal I would ever need. The loudest sound in the world is not a gunshot or a shout. It is the sound of truth being spoken in a place that was built on lies. A hero's reward isn't a medal. It's seeing the peace they fought to create. The battle in the desert and the battle in the courtroom were won. But I knew as I looked at Clara's smiling face that the most important part of our journey was just beginning. The long, quiet journey home. Not to a place, but to a feeling of lasting peace. We weren't alone. Ben was there, quiet as ever, his presence a steady mountain. And Clara was there. But so were the other women, the ones we had found in the darkness beneath the earth. They stood together, a small circle of survivors. Their scents were all different, but they shared a common note now, the smell of quiet strength. In the very spot where she had been bound, they dug a small hole in the red earth. Clara held a young sapling in her hands, a Joshua tree, a symbol of life and resilience, a tree known for thriving in the harshest, most impossible conditions. I watched as she knelt, her hands once scarred by plastic cords, now gently pressing soil around the new roots. The hands that were once a symbol of her captivity were now planting the seeds of her freedom. She was putting life back into the ground that had witnessed so much of her pain. When she was finished, she looked over at me. She walked over, knelt down in the dust, and for a long moment just looked into my eyes. Then she leaned forward and gently rested her forehead against mine. Her scent was completely calm, like a quiet lake at dawn. It was the smell of peace, of gratitude, of home. It was her way of saying everything that words could never hold. And I closed my eyes, accepting her silent thank you and offering my own silent promise in return. Always. This story, my story, is not just about a rescue. It's a reminder that even in the most desolate wilderness, hope can take root and grow. It's about the quiet courage that lives in all of us, a stubborn green shoot pushing its way through cracked earth, waiting for a reason to fight for the sun. Maybe your desert isn't made of sand and rock. Maybe it's a desert of grief, of loneliness, of a fear that holds you captive. But I want you to know this: you are not forgotten. There is always someone or something searching for the scent of your hope on the wind. Grace finds a way. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that no one deserves to be forgotten, please share it with someone who might be lost in their own desert today. Your share could be the sign they've been praying for. And if you believe that love and loyalty are the most powerful forces in this universe, let me know by typing "Hope Found" in the comments below. Your stories and your strength give all of us hope. Of course, hitting that subscribe button means you'll join our pack for more stories that prove the best of us sometimes walks on four legs. Thank you for listening. You are seen. You are loved.